Good morning, my friends. I'm gonna read a quote from one of the gaming books that caught my eye some time back, and want to share it with you. Player characters are heroic not because of the tremendous powers they gain, but because of the terrible risks they take in the face of awesome dangers. This is why, if you think about it, what sets the character apart from everybody else in his village or her town. What drives them, motivates them, what makes them uh, take the extra step, go that extra distance, learn those additional those skills, uh, experience things, the urge to go to places that and put themselves in harm's way that the majority of the mortal beings of a given world would never do unless pushed into a corner. Now, this is what the definition of the hero varies from group to group, from culture to culture. And in this particular case, the defining comment was in a section on dealing with with deities, and when the hero becomes so powerful that they border on the uh, you know, the supreme, I guess, almost divinity scale capability when it comes to everybody else. And as a GM, as a player, if you play long enough, you've seen it. You've got into a point where your fighter is so awesome that he can mow down hordes of common foot soldiers like they're wheat, or your wizard she has such power that she can dominate an entire community or devastate the landscape around it without giving it a second thought. And at what point do the characters supersede the mundane world that they exist in? And the games, I won't say this for all game systems because it doesn't hold true, but there are Dungeons and Dragons, of course, is the big gorilla, and it has the most widest range of play options of any game system produced to date, and in part because of the sheer fan base it has, and its ability over the decades to go into some really obscure or uh, boundary pushing areas. There's a number of books on divine divinity. I'm going to review a couple of those here in the near future. Uh, that talks about traveling the planes, going to heaven and hell, and fighting for and against the Dizians thereof. So the fact of our character classes are designed to go from the mundane to the superior to epic, to prestige and to epic, and at some point as a GM and as a player, we cross over into what the realm of the surreal. We leave behind the mundane campaign world that we spent so much time enjoying or playing in, and step into through a window or a portal or whatever you want to call it into another dimension altogether. And at some point, you can't go back. You really don't look back. If you really, to me, and I guess the character of Elminster is a good example of one of these people who have surpassed everybody, and he surpassed all of his peers, and in part in kind because he's a chosen of his goddess, and in part because he's lived so he's all but immortal, and he has seen it all and gone everywhere and done everything there is to do, and this has left its mark on him. He doesn't interact with the average Joe public any more than he has to. And when he does, he rarely flashes the power, so to speak, because they would deify him, and that's not what he wants. Uh, Maybe using Elminster as an example is not as a good one because he's a singular character and a force unto himself, especially in Forgotten Realms. Ed Greenwood's original mage character from his own playing D&D days back in the day, from my understanding. You know, but so when you look at your characters from the perspective of everybody around them, this awe-inspiring individual. You see it in the movies. This is where we see the guy that seems to have the Matrix-like moves, or the uncanny knack to be able to be at the right place at the right time, or to catch that thrown weapon and spin it around and return it back without a bat in an eye. You know, the Jedi of the genre, so to speak. And at what point do we, as players, as GMs, start viewing them in that light? The second half of this, of course, deals with when you're encountering the deities themselves. Most fantasy, by nature, most fantasy game systems are intricately designed to or connected to the pantheon or the deities of their given world campaign, however you want to look at it. Whether they're directly intervening or indirectly, they're always there. The clerics are a cleric of a specific god. The followers of this god or that god are acts in certain ways based on the tenets or the alignment choices of that particular god. When our characters develop to the point where they can slay, a average age, a middle-aged dragon at the drop of a hat, uh, can take on demons, the upper echelon of demons and devils. The mundane problems of the world seem to be beneath them. We see that in experience too. The system's set up so at some point, just mowing down hordes of goblins is fruitless. You know, as a GM, I've always tried to avoid creating a situation where all you're going to do is toss and throw more and more freaking dust. You got dust everywhere. It ain't dust, it's grease. Uh, where all I'm going to do basically is throw hordes of critters or monsters or humanoids at your characters, and they're just going to hack their way through them. There are places and time for that, but in truth, if 20th level group wanders into a first level, second level dungeon full of, the home of a bunch of kobolds or goblins. The first time these guys mow through the first group of goblins, the goblins are going to wise up and run. They're going to flee. They are not going to hoard up and keep coming at the group because it's suicide. These are cowardly creatures to begin with. They are all about self-preservation and getting one over on the people, getting over on somebody who's in a weakened situation. They will not attack something of such awesome strength. You are gods as far as they're concerned, and they don't want no part of you. And as a GM, they should be played that way. Even though they may or may not have a handful of champions, those champions, fifth level, sixth level champions, are not going to have any stand up to the character group at the best. And I've had this at least twice, I think, in situations where I've put up the 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 culture, the society's best fighters, their champions, and just as a slowing down measure. They're here to sacrifice themselves against the player characters to allow the bulk of the community to flee, to survive, so that the females and the imps can get out, and the weaker males can withdraw and try to protect those so they can restart their community somewhere else, or come back at a later date when you got whatever it was you wanted and left. You know, where this runs into some interesting or problematic issues is when you start throwing the deities in there, and deities in general. We should be ants to them. Even a 20th level arch wizard is still an ant to a decent sized god. It is just the way it is. Now, you might have drawn the attention of that god. They may send an avatar or a visitor or a visitation or one of their minions, if you will, to have a discussion with this archwizard or confront them about something, or to eliminate them perhaps because they're horking the god off somehow. The god himself should not put in his 2 cents. On the other hand, if your characters get to the point where they can easily handle a god's avatar, it's time for them to start investigating the planar worlds and getting off of the mortal realm, because they're just out of they've made everybody else out of their league. They've left that league behind. And that you, as a GM, if you're going to continue that campaign's got to change, and you need to be very familiar with how that stuff works. There are in D&D, there are books on the subject. Here's an example that monster mythology. There's deities and demigods was one of the earlier books, and then there's a whole host of follow-ups to that, and the plane, at least 3 books I can think of on the planes, and which, if you look at it from a perspective of an epic level play, that's pretty much what those are for. You can still have epic level play in the real world, so to speak, the mortal world. The question is, can you campaign it? Can you GM, as a GM, can you represent it in a true light? A group of high powered. Hey, I've been in some of those groups. I've played characters, and I've ran groups where we've had characters exceeding 30 levels. I think there was the one group that was in the 50s, and they are world movers, world shakers. They make and break kingdoms and empires because of their sheer power. There is not very many peers that can or should be able to stand up to them. On the other hand, what was it with awesome power comes awesome responsibility kind of stuff. Well, there's some truth to that. All you got to look at is some of the recent comic book based movies where these superhero characters fight super villains in a urban setting and decimate the urban setting, and the people beneath them at the moment while the battle is going on are just ants. They didn't give any consideration, or very little consideration, to the fact that you are doing buku damage and in dollar value and psychological value, and to the bystanders. How many people got hurt or killed during this epic battle? And nobody thought nothing of it till after. And once it's over, hey, sorry, you know, just makes you wonder how hard is it for Superman to get insurance? You got to wonder that. How hard is it? Yeah, I'm doing double down in here right now. They call that a yak. You mix it together. I don't know why. I don't know why you'd want to, but anyway, the at some point you have to look at that and go, is my player character got too big for his sandals, so to speak? If so, we can move it into another genre and maybe an entirely new campaign. On the other hand, if the player are aware of this, you can get a lot of enjoyment of being a very powerful character in a mundane world, as long as you keep in mind that these are mundane people. You just can't bully them or push them around, or just flash your stuff and intimidate them into doing whatever you want without that messing with your alignment choices and choices as the flavor of the campaign of the game world. It's an interesting conundrum. How far and how long do we allow ourselves to push these characters? At what time, at what point do we make them retire and make them part of the historical canon of our game world, or do we just put them off to the side and call them a day and think back fondly on these particular individuals? I had a good friend many years ago who actually framed his character sheets and put them up on the wall when they got to a certain point, because they were testaments to a lot of time and effort and fun. Kind of miss you there, bud. Anyhow, something to consider.